Locked On Podcast Network presents Locked On Sports Today.
Houston and Iowa State battled on the hardwood in a late-night top 5 clash. Also, the USA women's hockey team set to fight for gold against Team Canada. And Joe Burrow has to demand out of Cincinnati if he wants to save his career. I'm Peter Bukowski, starting your day with the can't-miss stories and biggest debates in sports. You're Locked On Sports Today.
Searching all major sports. Found.
Let's start with the biggest story.
Two of the best teams in men's college basketball clashed on Monday night. Locked On Cougs host Parker Ainsworth reacted to Houston's throwdown with Iowa State.
Let's get on to it. Houston lets this one slip away. They're up 10 with about 7 minutes to go. There's a Kingston 3 to get him to 20 points. And it feels like things are rolling. And it goes on, and there's a very controversial kicked ball call. Controversial because it was wrong. I guess that's the controversy, is there's a kicked ball call that was wrong with a few minutes to go. The crowd was dead. Houston was kind of rolling. The kicked ball defeated a trap that was leading to a Houston fast break. Clearly on replay, no kick ball, but they called it. You can't review it. The ensuing sideline out of bounds play results in a immediate 3-point basket for Iowa State, and the crowd is right back in it. Now, I am not one to blame officials. Houston had several minutes to not let that beat them, but they ultimately did, and that was the wrong call, right? And I think that's an important momentum swing in this one to keep track of. Honestly, other big part of this game, that same second half stretch, was Emmanuel Sharp, who had 16 first half points and kind of carried the load in the first half, was unavailable for large stretches over 10 minutes of the second half with his 4 fouls sitting on the bench. We're used to seeing JoJo Tugler get into foul trouble, and Emmanuel Sharp was the one in foul trouble in this one, and he is such an important part of this offense in these tight games we saw in the first half. Frankly, having that option there would have been a big benefit, especially in that stretch. There was a 10-0 scoring run where Iowa State, once Houston went up 10, to kind of even the game out over a course of time, that Houston had chance after chance after chance and couldn't get a basket. Having Emmanuel out there to get one would have been, let's just say, well appreciated. This thing was also super close and nitpicky in other spots too. The Heisey 3 in the corner that ultimately gives them their final lead there at Iowa State. He barely had enough time, if you go back and watch that, to get the ball off. He catches and releases in milliseconds. It's an awkward release with Kingston Fleming's closing out, the shot clock winding down. And, of course, it splashes at the bottom of the net. He ends up being, I believe, the second leading scorer. He had 11 points, and no one had more than 12 at Iowa State, right? He's a bench guy that's made some important plays. I don't mean to diminish his role in the team, but he's not like a guy you scout we have to shut him down, right? These several moments like this in that basketball game that just don't quite go Houston's way. And look, there were moments that did too, right? I mean, they say that this Houston had, all things were wrong. Houston had a 10-point lead on a top 10 team on the road in their place in one of the most hostile environments in America, and they just can't quite seal it. Now, I will say, I said at the start of this gauntlet, this gauntlet where you have Iowa State on the road tonight, you've got Arizona next weekend, and at Kansas next Monday, that they were going to lose one of those 3 games. And this is it. You end up learning from this and winning 2 big ones next weekend. It may feel off or not. I do think, though, that at the end of the day, you're going to feel like you probably should have had this one because you were up 10 in the driver's seat at the 7-minute mark, and you just couldn't quite finish it. You couldn't quite seal the deal. I thought Miles Houston played really, really well in large stretches of the night tonight. His missed free throw at the front end of a 1-and-1, at kind of a need to get points kind of possession for Houston, really proved monumental because of the way that the rest of the game shaped out after that. And so it's just one of the things like this, and he's an over 80% free throw shooter this season. It's just these little itty bitty things that just add up, and that's how you lose these super close matchups. Now, in the big picture, yes, you let one slip on the road. I guess technically that means you're tied for first in the Big 12 with Arizona as opposed to having the outright first place shot, which makes next Saturday that much more important, right? And all kinds of chaos around that. And you're competing for a 1 seed. You want to be a 1 or a 2 so you can get into the South Regional and go through Houston and all that. Those are all big, 3,000 foot looking issues. And a very micro issue, though, like the things that were wrong with this team would have been also wrong with this team had that Heisey shot missed and they made one more three. Right? Like the big picture of things there would still have been there, and it's hard to like mask and cover that up in each of these things. I got people flying in with comments here talking about refereeing, heartbreaking loss, momentum killing, kick ball call, 10 in a row with less than 6 minutes left, calling a timeout. Samson always last class. They had several stop balls. The 10-0 run, though, to me was not, the 10-0 run to me at the end with the stop ball, the deal there to me was not that they weren't getting good shots, weren't getting offense, they weren't making shots, and that was a really big problem. I look at, though, like what's going to call in a timeout. You only got a couple left at that point. You want to have them for some drawn up sets as they tried to draw up there at the end to lift Sinak and attack with Flemings when Fleming slipped down. And the possession we haven't really talked about yet. Houston is down 2. And I guess I should point out, after the Milo Smith's free throw, Houston is down 2 and elects not to foul with 43 seconds left. And JoJo Tucker gets a block. Houston gets the rebound. They have about 20 seconds, like 19.5 seconds left with the ball and a timeout. They used one of those timeouts that they did not use earlier and drop a play. And the play attacks Flemings off of a phantom screen. It lifts Chris Sinak for some spacing, and Fleming slips. He just slips. Initially, I was like, did he get tripped? The TV angle was kind of awkward with some different fans back of their heads and stuff like that. And maybe he got slightly tripped by a little bit shoelace here or there, whatever, but that's not really the problem. Problem is he falls down, ball goes loose. Houston can't come up with it. I guess Sinak kind of like tries to flip a shot up or something, and it doesn't work, right? And then I would say gets the ball back, you foul. They miss the free throw, but Lipsy gets the rebound. That's all downhill from there. And
Stay up to date all year on the Houston Cougars by subscribing to Locked On Cougs on YouTube or your favorite podcast app. Your Locked On Sports today. Coming up, Team USA is playing for gold. Before we get to that, the Browns have a new defensive coordinator. The Winter Games are officially here, and if you're anything like us, you're locking in for the events you only get to see on the biggest stage every 4 years. And that's why following the Winter Games on FanDuel makes so much sense. From medal counts to individual events, finding your angle on the sports you care about most, FanDuel gives you more ways to stay connected to all the action. It's the building drama of curling matches, races decided by inches or fractions of a second. Both popular and niche events become must-watch when you're fully locked into the competition. The Winter Games are on, and there's no better way to follow them than with FanDuel. FanDuel, play your game. The Browns have hired Falcons passing game coordinator Mike Rutenberg as their DC.
Browns have a new DC. It's Mike Rutenberg coming over from the Falcons, where he was a defensive pass game coordinator. He comes to Cleveland to take over, for the first time in his career, the defensive coordinator role. He is very familiar with the scheme that Jim Schwartz ran, because he ran very similar schemes and systems under Robert Saleh, both in Jacksonville and San Francisco and New York when he was with the Jets. So he has that experience. It certainly fits the billing of what Todd Monken's trying to accomplish here of, listen, we're going to keep the system relatively the same. We're just going to have a different angle on it. And that's probably the thing I missed in talking through this. I really felt, to keep things status quo, that Todd Monken might just look internal and go with a Jason Tarver or go with an Ephraim Banda. But it felt like when push came to shove, this was Todd Monken putting his foot down saying, I'm going to do this thing my way, but I still want to do what's best for the players. And keep these guys in the right positions where they can be successful, make sure we're maximizing that. Now the challenge becomes Mike Rutenberg has to come into a room, talk to these guys, get their attention, capture them in a way that Jim Schwartz also did, because we know guys in that locker room on that defense side of the ball were openly campaigning for Jim Schwartz to get the head coaching job. He didn't. He left. He left in a tizzy the way he did, throwing his fit, and rightfully so. I understood why he was frustrated. But now the biggest challenge for Mike Rutenberg becomes making sure that guys that stick around from his coaching staff are bought in, making sure the players are bought into what he's trying to accomplish. And if he can do that, the defense can certainly still have some success and be very good, especially if the offense follows suit and holds up their end of the bargain and gets better this offseason to better support that side of the football. We'll talk about it even more coming up on Tuesday's episode of the Locked On Bruins podcast.
The Dolphins are cutting everyone, including Tyreek Hill.
The Dolphins and John Eric Sullivan woke up and said, I don't care that today is technically a holiday. We're going to cut everybody on the roster. Right? As first Jordan Schultz reports this morning that Bradley Chubb is out. And I got a staff meeting, and I'm on the staff meeting, and then James Daniels goes. Nick Westbrook-Ikine goes. Tyreek Hill goes. And it's just like everybody, heads are rolling down the hill here in South Florida for salary cap compliance purposes. And you can't say the Dolphins aren't salary cap compliant anymore.
Alana Myers-Taylor finally has her gold. The 41-year-old mother of two rallied in the final heat of the women's monobob in Cortina d'Ampezzo to win, then leapt into the air and dropped to her knees as the Star-Spangled Banner played. After 5 previous Olympic medals, 3 silver, 2 bronze, she's now an Olympic champion and the oldest American woman to win Winter Games gold, tying Bonnie Blair with 6 career Winter Olympic medals. I didn't need it, she said, but I wanted it. Complete domination. It took 11 minutes for Sweden to record their first shot on goal against the U.S. on Monday afternoon, and it didn't get much better after that as the Team USA women thrashed the Swedes 5-0 in the Olympic semifinal. Locked On NHL Squad Show host Gil Martin and Eddie Garcia reacted to the shutout and looked ahead to the gold medal match against Team Canada.
Yeah, this is the matchup we all wanted to see, and I'm sure it'll be a great competitive game. But as far as the overall health of the sport of women's hockey, there isn't a lot there besides Canada and the U.S. We thought, right, they talked about it a lot on the broadcast, how Sweden had beaten the U.S. years ago, and they thought that would be the start of something, the rise of Swedish women's hockey, and it just didn't happen. So I would say overall, not great for the sport of women's hockey that 2 teams are so dominant.
Yes and no. I agree with you to an extent. I think it would be nice to see some more parity around women's hockey. But at the same time, you think back to over the years, all the great championship matchups, not just in hockey, but in sports in general. From an entertainment standpoint, from a competition standpoint, you want to see the 2 best teams duke it out, right? It's like sometimes you just want to play the hits. Sometimes the matchup that is going to be the most fun on paper is what winds up being the best. If the people what they want. Of course it's US, Canada. And am I disappointed to an extent? Sure. But when it comes to the Olympics, at the end of the day, I want the 2 best teams, 2 best nations competing for gold. I wouldn't have it any other way.
This goes back really, Gil, to a larger question of, do you like dynasties or do you like different teams winning every year? Were the Islanders dynasties of the 80s and the Oilers of the 90s or the Canadians of the 70s, was that better for the sport? Or is it better when you don't know who's going to win because there's a lot of parity? But Eddie, I'm not entirely sure this is going to be a competitive gold medal game.
True.
I mean, let me throw a name at you, okay? Barbora Yugichkova. I practiced that. She's a 19-year-old forward. Yeah, I know. How did I get it so badly? And I practiced it. Barbora Yugichkova. She's a 19-year-old forward from Team Czechia. She scored a goal against Team USA in the first game they played. That's also the only goal that anybody has scored against Team USA. They've pitched a shutout for 333 consecutive minutes. They've outscored their opposition in this tournament 31-1.
It's not bad.
And Aaron Frankel in goal has been a brick wall, 3 straight shutouts, including domination of Canada in the preliminary round. So I will be gobsmacked if it isn't the U.S. getting the gold medal put around their necks on Thursday.
How important is it for Canada to at least make this competitive? I mean, this is the sport, you know, it's Canada's sport. It's important to them, and the Canadian women were originally the dominant force in Olympic hockey up until fairly recently. There's a lot of pride on the line here. What does it mean to Canada to get a little revenge for that one-sided loss, where they didn't have their captain, by the way, but that one-sided loss in the round-robin round of this tournament?
I mean, it would be huge for them. But to Glenn's point, the USA already beat them handily in this tournament. So he brings up a great point. And while it is the two nations that have been the best in women's hockey in the history of the sport, this particular event, and right now, the USA is clearly head and shoulders above any other nation. They were talking about on the broadcast that this is, in their opinion, clearly the best U.S. women's hockey team of all time. So it's clearly, I mean, when you were talking about this, Glenn, it made me think of the Miracle on Ice. And what did we think? Some of us that may be old enough to remember that. I was little, but I do remember. I know, Glenn, I didn't say anything. Oh, Gil, I do remember what an underdog, of course, the USA was in that, and of course, the Russia had beaten them handily in pre-Olympic competition. So it makes me. It's kind of crazy to think these two nations could be a women's Miracle on Ice if Canada wins this, because that's how much we're talking about historically this U.S. women's team is.
I can't bring myself to count Canada out. Like, for that reason alone, you don't want to get too high or too low. I think the U.S. wins, but I wouldn't be surprised if Canada puts up a fight and makes them sweat for 60 minutes.
Stay up to date all year on Olympic hockey and the NHL by subscribing to Locked On NHL on your favorite podcast app. Coming up, Burrow has to get away from Cincy if he wants his career to survive. The Cincinnati Bengals are wasting Joe Burrow's prime. According to Locked On NFL host Tony Wiggins and Julian Council, Burrow needs to demand a trade in order to save his career.
Anybody would be happy making $45, $50 million a year, throwing the ball to Jamar Chase and T. Higgins. The bottom line, though, is it'll get real old real quick once that pressure starts mounting on him the way it is on like Lamar Jackson and other players, where he doesn't get a mulligan for the team being bad at being a team. He's going to have that. People are going to look dead at him the way they do most quarterbacks. You'd think they would anyway, sooner or later.
Yeah, maybe, but like, let's be honest. You look at the defense the last 3 years, put down some of these numbers. I mean, they're last in total defense. That's just total yardage, which I don't really look at as being that big of a deal as far as actually looking overall at defense. But then they're last in yards per play allowed. They're 29th in third down percentage defense, which is not good. They're 28th in red zone percentage. And if you look at some of the advanced analytics, they're 29th in EPA per play. They're 31st in success rate. They're 32nd in havoc rate. That means getting sacks, tackles for loss, turnovers, all of that. This has not been a good defense the last 3 years as they missed the playoffs. 2 years where they're 9-8 and very close to it. And then last year where they didn't have a chance even when Joe Burrow came back in there, and when Joe Flacco was lighting things up offensively as well. And you talk about how bad of an organization they have been historically. They've not done a great job in surrounding Joe, obviously, with an offensive line at times, but also defensively. They drafted 3 guys last year, and you look at all 3 of them, you could say after 1 year, they've all been misses. Shamar Stewart, that first-round pick out of A&M, had the whole contract dispute. Then he finally came in, only played 8 games, had 1 sack. Look at PFF for whatever that's worth. He was the lowest-graded edge rusher last season. They drafted Demetrius Knight in the 2nd round, Barrett Carter in the 4th round out of Clemson, and those guys were 2 of the lowest-graded linebackers in the NFL, according to PFF. If you're not going to hit on dudes in the draft and get the cheap players when you don't want to pay guys like Trey Hendrickson, then I don't really know how you're ever going to turn things around defensively, especially when you're firing defensive minds like Lou Anarumo. So until they get that figured out, can keep Joe healthy, it's going to be a conversation that we continue to have.
Here's the problem. Joe Burrow made this bed. He was the one that said, pay me all the money, which he is entitled to do and is wise to do. Get your money always. He's also the one that advocated the team pay Jamar Chase at the top of the non-quarterback market and to pay T. Higgins, the second of which is the more questionable move. Jamar Chase, a top 3 receiver by any estimation. Joe Burrow, one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL. You want those 2 guys on your team. But when you orient an entire franchise around 3 players and you have an offense that is not good enough to overcome a bad defense, you're stuck. But this is what you wanted. This is what you advocated for, Joe Burrow. And you wanted Zach Taylor to be around. It's true. Cincinnati is a cheap organization. They've been a cheap organization, and that's not going to change unless they sell the team. But there's no guarantee any other place is going to be any better. Really, there's not. In terms of management and ownership, there are very few stable teams in the NFL, and even fewer still, who need quarterbacks. So, okay, you could force your way to the Minnesota Vikings, but the Cincinnati Bengals, they don't want to trade anybody. They're going to trade you to exactly the place you want to go. I don't think so. Joe Burrow is stuck. Just like Myles Garrett is stuck in Cleveland. He could have not taken the money, but they're stuck because they chose to be. And finally, Derek Carr would like everyone to know he's open to unretiring. Just not for you, or probably 27 of the 32 teams in the league. On his podcast, Carr said he'd consider coming back, but only if he's fully healthy and if it's for a legit Super Bowl contender. Cool. Appreciate you setting the market there, Derek. Carr retired in May after the Saints revealed a labral tear and significant degenerative changes in his shoulder. But now, apparently, he's feeling spry enough to weigh championship offers. Just a minor detail to work out. He walked away with 2 years left on his deal. So any team would have to trade with the New Orleans Saints first for a 34-year-old who hasn't won a playoff game since, ever. Coming up, a heavy slate of Winter Olympic action continues through this week. So at least until tomorrow, stay locked on sports today.
Locked On Podcast Network presents Locked On Sports Today.